So I sense this is a video that's probably going to get me some stick. I sense the title alone of the video is probably going to get me some stick. But it's one that I'm keen to make because it's something I'm actually fairly passionate about in the sport of boxing. And we're going to be talking a lot about Roman Gonzalez in this particular piece. I'm going to start, let's make it a bit like a story. You know, you guys know I cover a lot of boxing on this channel. I watch a lot of boxing. Roman Gonzalez is not a fighter I know a huge amount about. Of course, I'm aware of his story, his name, his record. Of course, I've seen bits and pieces of him. But I cannot pretend to be one of these boxing fans who has necessarily sat down and went through multiple of his back catalogue and, you know, what's fight after fight after fight. You know, I'm aware of Roman Gonzalez. I've seen him box, etc. But I always questioned, and I've questioned it on multiple occasions on this channel, multiple occasions on the podcast we do on Wednesdays, this guy's pound for pound status. I've always thought it was laughable how quickly fans were to anoint this guy as the pound for pound number one. And the large reason that I thought it was laughable was because of the complete lack of pound for pound level opposition he'd beaten. And if you bear with me on this, and if you've been watching my channel for a long time, you know that throughout the history of my channel, I've been consistent completely on that. You know, I can think in the last 3 or 4 years that I've been doing this. Guillermo Rigondeaux, Vasil Lomachenko, Roman Gonzalez, Gennady Golovkin. These are all guys that people have came at me and said, this is the pound for pound number one in the sport right now, or this guy is a definite for the pound for pound top three. And each and every time I've been consistent by refuting that and by saying, in my opinion, these guys are not at the very top of the pound for pound table. Now don't get me wrong, they're all very, very, very good fighters. They're all champion level fighters within their respective divisions. But to get to a pound for pound top three is something quite different. And I've always maintained that you can't simply get to the top of the pound for pound list just by beating names, you know, who are quality championship type names in your division. You've got to beat recognised world class elite fighters. So for me on this channel, I've always been consistent in saying that on my pound for pound list, I'm having guys like Andre Ward. Why? Because Andre Ward beat the very best at 168 pounds and has gone on to get victories over the best at 175 pounds. Andre Ward has victories on his resume against guys like Sergey Kovalev, against guys like Carl Frost, both of whom I think could have been considered top 10 pound for pound at the time Andre Ward fought and beat them. Manny Pacquiao, you know, I don't need to talk to you guys about Manny Pacquiao's resume. You all know the strength and depth of his resume, but you get the picture. Vladimir Klitschko is another guy who I had near the top of the pound for pound list. You know, what I'm getting at is, for me, a guy like Roman Gonzalez, it became a very fashionable thing to anoint this guy as pound for pound number one. You know, on the Boxing Voice, they use the phrase the boxing hipsters, and I think there's some truth in that. You know, it became a way of showing your knowledge about boxing and how much of a boxing hipster you were by saying, oh yeah, Roman Gonzalez is the number one. For me, I struggled to consider Roman Gonzalez as a number one, bearing in mind that I was just unaware of the majority of the opposition he was facing, and therefore unaware of the level of opponent he was actually beating and their capabilities. But regardless, you know, I wanted to watch this fight this weekend. The talk about Roman Gonzalez has been consistent. The talk about Roman Gonzalez has been fairly aggressive, and I wanted to sit down and watch his fight this week. Now, in advance of the weekend's fight, I had a look at his opponent, and I've got to say, I really was not impressed. This is a guy, I'm going to butcher his name, but I'll do my very best here. Rungvisai. We'll call him Rungvisai in this video, as I think that's the closest I'm going to get. Super flyweight, 30 years old. Went into the ring with a record of 41 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. 42 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. facing Roman Gonzalez. So I looked down at his resume and I was absolutely flabbergasted at what I saw. I was flabbergasted at what I saw. And believe me when I say this was prior to the fight taking place. Rungvisai's last opponent was against an opponent who was on his debut. To repeat, the fight immediately prior to taking on the supposed pound for pound number one in the sport was against an opponent making his debut. But I'm afraid it gets better than that. Because the fight prior to that, so not only the fight before the Gonzalez fight, but the second fight before that, was against an opponent who was making his debut. Now that's right, no exaggeration, against an opponent who was making his debut. So people take the mick out of Deontay Wilder because the fight before he fought for the World Championship was against Jason Gaverne. Well, if you've ever taken the mick out of Wilder facing Gaverne, I suggest you have a severe look at Mr. Rungvisai's resume, who beat two debutants. But I'm afraid it doesn't stop there. Let's move to the fight immediately prior to the two debutants. He fought an opponent with a 12-win, 19-loss resume. Prior to that, a 3-win, 5-loss resume. Unbelievably, it was actually 2015 last time this guy fought someone with a winning record. And even then, it was 12 wins, 10 losses, 2 draws. And I'm afraid that the run of consistently terrible opponents runs a long way back in his resume. He fought Carlos Cuadras in the first half of 2014, some 3 years ago. And since that fight against Carlos Cuadras, he stepped into the ring 14 times. And as far as I can make out, of those 14 occasions, he has only faced 3 opponents with winning records. Absolutely laughable. Laughable. So I didn't necessarily expect this guy to cause any problems whatsoever for Roman Gonzalez. I've heard all these good things about Roman Gonzalez. I've heard how he's got an elite skill set. I've heard what a complete fighter he is. I've heard time and time again how he's the pound for pound number one. And he's stepping in against a guy, Rungvisai, with 4 losses and a draw, a guy who's been stopped twice, and a guy who's, as I say, fought a majority of opponents with losing records, and the 2 fights prior were against debutants. And if we actually go through this guy's resume, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 debutants. I don't know if I've ever heard of a professional boxer outside of the journeyman, who fight 13 debutants. So absolutely ludicrous. So I sat down expecting this to be very, very, very easy work for Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, a man who has consistently described to me as having godlike qualities in the ring. And as you'll probably no doubt be surprised, I was absolutely flabbergasted at what I saw in this particular fight. Let me start by talking about the Box Nation commentary, because I watched this on the Box Nation, the Box Nation app, which I'm a subscriber to. I'm going to give you 3 quotes that the Box Nation commentators used to describe Roman Gonzalez throughout the course of their broadcast. Number 1, flawless. Flawless, lacking in any flaws. Number 2, complete. And number 3, an all-time great. Flawless, complete, and an all-time great. So let me reiterate, we have a flawless, complete, all-time great, pound for pound number 1, going in against Mr. Rungvisai with one of the worst padded records I have ever seen in my life. Who would have picked the upset here? Now I've got to say, the fight was actually a very, very, very entertaining fight. If you haven't seen the fight and you want to watch a good scrap, you should check it out. And Roman Gonzalez, for all the skepticism and criticism you're going to get of him in this video from myself, he is a very good fighter. He clearly has a lot of attributes. I can see why he's a popular fighter. He makes for a very, very entertaining guy to watch, and it's an entertaining entertaining fight. But for commentators to use the words flawless, complete, and an all-time great, looking at what this guy showed in the ring, Gonzalez I'm referring to, is frankly laughable. And it shows that, like a substantial proportion of the boxing public, they have been taken in by this absolute myth that Chocolatito Gonzalez is some sort of phenom within the boxing world. The guy, I mean, let's start with this. I was amazed at how this fight went. Rungvisai, I actually think was a comparatively basic fighter. And it was a close fight. Some people feel Gonzalez won, but it was a close fight. Rungvisai was a comparatively basic fighter. He clearly had a bit of snap to his punches. He clearly could punch with decent power, but he was a plodder. He was flat-footed as hell. He came forward, relentlessly coming forward. He only looked to throw when he could set his feet, and he would just swing in front of Gonzalez. I expect a pound-for-pound guy in terms of skill to be able to deal with a fighter like Rungvisai. Now, I've already said in this video that I don't believe Roman Gonzalez had the capability to be a pound for pound in terms of resume. I still maintain that solidly and consistently. But having watched this fight, I also question whether he's got the pound for pound skill set, eye test, to actually be a pound for pound top level fighter. What do you do when you've got a guy who's coming forward at you looking to throw power punches in a relentless attempt to get you involved in a brawl and bring the fight inside the pocket? What are the basic things that any boxer looks to do? Well, you try and keep range. How do you try and keep range? Well, you look to establish your jab, you look to use lateral movement, you look to use the width of the ring. This is basic stuff. This is stuff that any amateur boxer across the country will be able to tell you. I didn't see any of that from Chocolatito Gonzalez. He was in against a bigger man than him. He was in against a guy who appeared to be a harder puncher than him. He was in against a guy who was clearly hurting him. He dropped Gonzalez heavily in the first round. He also cut him on several occasions due to consistent clashes of heads. I expect, if that was Floyd Mayweather in there, and I'm not, clearly there's a weight difference, but take the point, if that was Floyd Mayweather in against a guy fighting that style, Floyd would have absolutely taken him to school. Roman Gonzalez, clearly he's a technician. Clearly he's got more capability and skill set than Rungvisai. Did he use it? Absolutely not. He showed zero tactical versatility in this fight. Zero ability to adapt. Zero ability to bring anything new to the table. How many times in this fight did you look and see Roman Gonzalez keeping Rungvisai at range by establishing a solid jab? I mean, this is boxing 101. How many times in this fight did you look to see Roman Gonzalez circle out of the pocket and dance around the ring, creating range, creating distance for the superior technician to get his work off cleanly? Not at all. For me, Gonzalez allowed himself to be walked down by a bigger, stronger, more powerful man. He got himself completely sucked into a dogfight, completely sucked into a scrap, and resorted to trading power punches inside the pocket and getting sucked into an all-out war. It was very, 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 very dubious strategy and very poor tactics. I don't know if Gonzalez's corner was unable to provide him any sort of suggestion to move and to jab and to keep range, but Gonzalez had absolutely nothing in terms of adaptation inside the ring. Perhaps what was even more concerning than that was the lack of defence Gonzalez showed. Of all the fighters that we consider pound for pound top level fighters, I mean, let me just throw out a few names of guys who've been considered pound for pound level fighters of late. Guys like Floyd Mayweather, guys like Andre Ward, guys like Guillermo Rigondeaux, you know the list of top level fighters. How many of them have shown defensive frailties like Roman Gonzalez showed this weekend? The guy was blocking punches with his face routinely, absolutely routinely. I can see why Gonzalez, against lesser opponents, maybe against smaller opponents, I can see why Gonzalez would catch the eye test and convince people, because he's a guy who puts punches together very nicely. He picks his shots very well. He's quite explosive. He's a guy who relies on reactions and reflexes. But technically, I don't think the guy's anything special. I don't think he's got a technically strong defence. I don't believe he's got much of a jab. I don't believe his movement is what it needs to be. I don't believe his tactics and his tactical versatility is there. I thought it was a very one-dimensional performance from Roman Gonzalez. And quite frankly, the equivalent would be Floyd Mayweather stepping in a ring with Gennady Golovkin and deciding to fight the fight in a phone booth and exchange hooks from a foot away for the entire 12-round duration. Ludicrous. I've heard some people defending him online saying that's just the way he fights. That's just the way he fights. Well, lots of fighters fight in a certain way, and because they're not good enough, it means they're not pound for pound number one. And I'm afraid if that's the way Roman Gonzalez fights, clearly he's not pound for pound number one. I mean, how many of you guys are now putting Rungvisai as pound for pound number one? Well, I think there's a question that some of you should be doing that, because he just went and beat Roman Gonzalez and got the judge's decision and caused Gonzalez a hell of a lot of problems. The truth is that elite pound for pound level fighters have different looks. Elite pound for pound fighters can adapt. They can bring different things to the table. And I appreciate Gonzalez is a very, very, very good fighter. I appreciate he is a world championship level fighter. I appreciate he was in against a guy who was bigger than him, who hit harder than him, and who was probably a weight division above Gonzalez's ideal weight. But Gonzalez did not show the skill set and versatility of a pound for pound great. He did not show the flawless completeness of his he did not show the flawlessness and complete nature of his game that Box Nation was suggesting he did. How can you be flawless when you're taking that many punches? How can you be complete when you're getting walked down and hammered by Rungvisai? It's just boxing 101 type stuff. It really is, I'm afraid. I've said this for a long time, and this has long been my suspicion, that these lighter weight classes are a lot thinner in terms of quality than the more mainstream weight classes. And I mean, let's do a little experiment here to prove the point. I'm getting BoxRec up right now. So let's start at light flyweight. Light flyweight, 464 boxers registered on BoxRec. Let's move to flyweight. 721 boxers registered at flyweight. Let's move to super flyweight, which is Rungvisai's division. 669 boxers in total. So 400 and something, 700 and something, and 600 and something. Let's go for three of the more mainstream divisions. So let's go lightweight, welterweight, middleweight. Lightweight, well, instantly you can see the difference. 1,986 registered boxers. Welterweight, 2,196 registered boxers. Middleweight, 1,532 registered boxers. Even up at heavyweight, even the absolute giants, 1,281 registered boxers. So this is telling you something here. This is telling you something very, very, very revealing to me. A lot of people I've spoken to have said that this Rungvisai was genuinely a top 5, top 10 level operator within his division, even prior to Roman Gonzalez and that fight. But clearly, these divisions are a hell of a lot thinner. Put simply, there are less people campaigning in them. Now, whether that's because there are less people in the world who are the size of a light flyweight, I don't know. I haven't done an extensive enough surveying to suggest that is the case. But factually, what we can say is that in terms of the numbers of boxers registered at those weights, light flyweight, flyweight, super flyweight, they are less than half of the number of boxers registered at the more mainstream weight classes like lightweight, welterweight and middleweight. So it seems logical to suggest that the competition will be slightly more aggressive and slightly higher at the higher weight classes, because there's more people campaigning and as a result more obvious competition. The fact that the consensus from people who know about these divisions does genuinely seem to be that Rungvisai was top 5 or top 10 prior to this bout confirms my suspicion on that, because you would not get a top 5 welterweight who had lost 4 times, drawn once, fought 13 debutants, and had 10 guys who were losing records in his last 13 fights. It just would not happen. It would not happen. So what I'm getting at is, for me, Roman Gonzalez has been campaigning at weight divisions where the water has been a hell of a lot less deep than guys like Andre Ward and guys like Manny Pacquiao have been competing throughout their careers. Roman Gonzalez has not beaten fellow pound for pound level of opposition. He's not got the depth of quality in the win column on his resume with the opponents he's beaten that the elite pound for pound level fighters have, and people have got massively sucked in. I don't want to come across like a Roman Gonzalez hater, but it has frustrated me how many people have been so quick to jump on the bandwagon and call this guy a pound for pound number 1 level fighter. It has frustrated me because it's so obviously not the case. It obviously wasn't the case based on resume. And now, having actually watched the fight and heard how complete and how flawless Gonzalez is, it's clear that that's wide of the mark as well. Flawless fighters do not get walked down by flat-footed, one-dimensional, slugger-type puncher guys like Rungvisai. They don't sip as many punches as Roman Gonzalez did in that fight, and they show more technical attributes. They show better defense, they show better movement, they show more understanding of a jab, they show a breadth of tactical versatility, they show the ability to mix it up. So that's just my thoughts. Gonzalez, clearly a good fighter, clearly a world championship level fighter, certainly someone who could probably drop down to light flyweight and flyweight where the water's far less deep, and where there's only a half or a quarter of the fighters in the division than there are at welterweight, and he could win other versions of the world title. And maybe if he takes on the big names constantly, there is a case to include him in a pound for pound top 15 list. Maybe, I don't know. But to include him at pound for pound number 1 is frankly ludicrous. And anyone who wants proof of that simply needs to watch the Rungvisai fight. And anyone who also wants to watch a good fight and a great scrap should also watch that Rungvisai fight. A very revealing fight to me. A very revealing fight. Based on Rungvisai's resume, I thought it was going to be incredibly easy work. I thought Gonzalez was going to take him to school. But what I saw, really confirmed my suspicions that this isn't the best fighter in boxing. Let me know your thoughts. Are there still people out there who disagree with me? Do people still believe that Roman Gonzalez is pound for pound number 1? And let me say, I know that he was fighting in a weight division that may be a division that wouldn't be the ideal choice for him. I appreciate that. I appreciate there are mitigating factors. I appreciate some people felt it was a robbery and that Gonzalez deserved to win. But regardless of all of that, even if that were true, even if Gonzalez had won this fight, even if he'd nicked it by a round, against a bigger man, my commentary would still stay the same, because the frailties he showed in his game against the guy with a resume as padded as Rungvisai's would clearly suggest he isn't pound for pound number 1. Clearly. This is the equivalent of Andre Ward moving from super... it's the equivalent of Manny Pacquiao moving up from welterweight to light middleweight and facing a guy with a handful of losses who's fought, a load of absolute nonsense and lost to 1 or 2 good fighters. It's the equivalent of Manny Pacquiao stepping up to light middleweight and fighting Brian Rose, Certainly in terms of resume, Rungvisai is a better fighter pound for pound than Rose, but you're getting my point. But leave your comments in the section below. This is turning into a rant, so I'm going to cut it short. Leave your comments in the section below. Do you still believe Gonzalez is pound for pound number 1? Do you now have Rungvisai as your pound for pound number 1? Am I wide of the mark? Let's discuss. Comments in the section below, please. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. I've got a decent feeling a lot of people are going to not enjoy this video and hit the thumbs down, because it is immensely fashionable to be a fan of the flyweights and be a fan of Roman Gonzalez, and have something you can laugh at the casual fans for because you have an understanding of the light flyweight division and they don't. So if you did enjoy the video, help me out by hitting the thumbs up button, and as always, if you're new to the channel, you haven't done so before, take the opportunity to subscribe. Really do appreciate you all tuning in. Many thanks indeed for watching.